Andrew awoke to a gnawing sense of despair, the kind that had become his unwelcome companion. His tiny studio apartment smelled faintly of turpentine and cold toast, the air still from a night with no breeze and no sleep. Sunlight crept through threadbare curtains, laying pale bars of light across unfinished canvases, leaning against every wall like silent witnesses. He sat up slowly, his back stiff and aching like it always did, after sleeping on the lumpy futon he insisted wasn't that bad. Rent was late again. His phone had stopped buzzing 2 days ago, battery dead, or maybe just no one left to call. After sitting in the quiet too long, he finally decided to get out. Coffee was the plan, but he already knew it'd probably turn into a beer. He locked the door behind him with a faint click and turned to see Mr. Kleinhoff, the elderly man from next door, shuffling up the steps. The man wore an old cardigan and carried a folded newspaper under one arm like it was part of his uniform. "Good morning, Andrew," the old man said in his thick accent, giving him a nod that was almost too precise. He liked the Kleinhoffs. There was something solid about them, like they had their routines carved into stone. They didn't talk much, didn't ask questions, just smiled and went about their lives. In a building full of ghosts and deadbolts, that counted for something. He made it out to the street, already drifting toward the bar instead of the cafe. His mind was muddy, dragging behind his feet like a worn-out dog leash. The bar was nearly empty, the kind of place where the lights were dim on purpose and nobody judged you for drinking before noon. The bartender didn't bother with small talk, just slid the flat beer across the counter. Andrew sipped it slowly, watching the condensation trail down the side like it had somewhere better to be. A half hour later, walking aimlessly, he passed by a pawn shop he'd never noticed before. It was wedged between a laundromat and a boarded-up bakery, its windows stained with years of dust and fingerprints. The neon sign buzzed faintly, only the P and E in open still lit, the rest flickering weakly like dying stars. He was halfway past when he saw it, a camera. It sat in the front display case like something forgotten, but somehow still alert. A leather case, cracked at the edges, lay open beside it. 2 rolls of film, unopened, rested like offerings in a shrine. Andrew's footsteps slowed. Something about the thing pulled at him. Maybe it was the idea of trying something different. Maybe it was the flicker of possibility. Maybe it was just the kind of day that felt like it had nothing to lose. He stepped inside. The bell above the door let out a tired chime, the kind you'd expect from an old funeral home or a church that hadn't seen a wedding in years. The man behind the counter barely looked up. He was short, narrow-shouldered, with grey hair slicked back and reading glasses perched low on his nose. A newspaper lay splayed in front of him like a barrier. "Let me know if I can help you," he said, in a gravelly voice that sounded Eastern European. Andrew wandered through the shop's tight aisles, brushing past shelves of cracked clocks and rusted tools. It smelled like old wood and forgotten time. When he reached the front window, he crouched by the camera and slowly opened the case. The hinges creaked in protest. Inside, tucked behind the camera body, were a few old photographs. He pulled them out. A collapsed bridge over dark water, a village street charred and empty, a mangled car beneath a skeletal tree. He stared at them for a moment, uneasy, then tucked them back in the case and placed the camera in his hands. Behind him, the shopkeeper's voice came again. "That's a good deal right there," he said. "You'll really be able to see people using that." Andrew turned, a chill threading down his spine. But the man was reading his paper again, like he hadn't spoken at all. Andrew flipped the tag dangling from the camera's leather strap. $15, the exact amount in his pocket. He hesitated, then walked to the counter, camera in hand. "Hey, I only have 15. Would you be willing to let it go for that?" The man glanced up, his eyes dark behind the glasses. "15's the price, isn't it?" he said, then added quietly, "You're not the first to carry it out of here." Andrew blinked. "What?" But the man was already turning the page, as if the conversation was over. Andrew laid the cash down. The man didn't touch it, just nodded. "Can I take the film too?" "Yes, hard to find that kind of film," he said. Andrew stepped outside. The sun had dimmed behind a cloud, or maybe it was just the way it hit the street. He paused. Behind him, the door clicked shut. The neon sign went dark, the lock turned, then the shade came down. He glanced at his phone for the time. 2 o'clock. Andrew walked home with the camera tucked tight under his arm. It felt heavier than he expected, not in a physical way, but like it had history, weight that didn't come from metal and glass. His fingers twitched around the worn leather strap, like part of him was afraid it might shift or vanish if he let his guard down. Back in his apartment, the door clicked shut behind him, and he stood in the middle of the room, suddenly unsure of what to do next. The silence felt different now, tense, focused, like the air itself was holding its breath. He set the camera down on the table and unzipped the old case. The same brittle smell hit him again, dust and time, maybe something faintly metallic. He lifted the camera out carefully, then noticed the photos he'd tucked back in earlier. They'd shifted, slid out of the lining, and lay scattered like a quiet accusation. He picked one up. The bridge again, the same jagged break in the middle, stone teeth reaching for water. Another showed the wrecked car. This time, he noticed what looked like a hand pressed against the inside of the shattered windshield. He squinted, unsure if it had always been there. The last one, the war photo, was blurred at the edges. Figures were standing in the smoke, but their faces were missing. Not obscured, missing, just blank space. He put them back, not wanting to look anymore. From the case's side pocket, he pulled the yellowed instruction manual. The font was stiff and mechanical. English, but barely. For best results, adjust aperture and shutter in harmony. The diagrams looked like they were drawn by hand. One page had a fingerprint smudged across it, not his. Andrew exhaled, long and quiet. Then he loaded the first roll of film. Later, as the sun dropped and the city turned gold and then grey, he took the camera outside. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but he knew he had to take something. Anything. He ended up near the little corner shop where Lena worked, a place he never really needed to go, but often found reasons to. He'd always kind of had a crush on her. He pushed open the door, and the bell gave a soft jingle that barely cut through the background hum of the place. Lena looked up from behind the counter, surprised for a second. "Hey, stranger," she said, smiling. "Hey," he said, lifting the camera case a little, like it explained his presence. "What's that you got there?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's an old camera. I found it in a pawn shop earlier today. Kind of a weird impulse buy. Thought I'd see if it still worked." She stepped closer, curious. "That's pretty cool. You know how to use it?" "I took a class in college," he said. "Barely remember half of it. But I figured I'd walk around and see what I could capture. I've been shooting whatever grabs me. Buildings, signs, random stuff. Just burning film, really." She glanced at the camera, then back at him. "And now you're here." He gave a crooked grin. "Yeah, I was wondering if maybe I could take your picture." Her eyes widened slightly. Then she laughed, nervous. "Me? I mean, only if that's okay. You don't have to." No, she said quickly. "It's fine. Just give me a second to fix my hair." She ducked behind the counter and grabbed a small mirror and a comb from her purse. He fiddled with the camera while she smoothed her hair, both of them avoiding eye contact like they were back in high school. When she reappeared, she leaned on the counter with an almost bashful smile and raised a peace sign beside her cheek. "Okay," she said. "I'm ready." Andrew lifted the camera, adjusted the focus, and paused for just a breath longer than needed. Click. On the way home, he found himself cutting behind the building, through the narrow alley that led to the garden behind the apartment. A quiet spot. An old patch of dirt, a chain-link fence, a couple of cracked plastic chairs, and there they were, Mr. Kleinhoff in his usual chair, newspaper open. Mrs. Kleinhoff was on her knees by the flower bed, tucking marigolds into the earth with delicate hands. Andrew stood for a moment, watching. Then he stepped forward and cleared his throat. They looked up together, not startled, just aware. "Hi," he said. I picked up this old camera today. I'm still getting the hang of it, but I was wondering, would it be okay if I took your picture?" Mrs. Kleinhoff looked at her husband, then back at Andrew. Her smile was tight, her eyes unreadable. "That would be fine," she said. "Yes?" Mr. Kleinhoff folded his paper neatly. "Yes, of course." Andrew stepped back, lifted the camera, and peered through the viewfinder. The world shrank. They sat in the center of the frame, framed by dying sunlight and the ragged line of the garden. Everything looked still. Too still. He adjusted the focus, turned the aperture. "Hold still," he said softly. They didn't move. He pressed the shutter. Click. It echoed louder than it should have. In the lens, something shifted. Not in them, but behind them. The air looked warped for a second, like heat rising off pavement. Then it was gone. Andrew lowered the camera. They were still looking at him. He forced a smile. "Thanks." They nodded in unison. He turned to leave, but didn't look back. He didn't want to. Andrew went back upstairs feeling like something had shifted, though he couldn't say what. The camera hung from his shoulder, heavier now. He wasn't sure if it was in his head or in the mechanics, but it felt like it had taken something with that click. Inside, the apartment felt colder than before. Not cold like a draft, but like absence. He shut the door, locked it, and set the camera gently on the kitchen table next to an old coffee mug full of hard brushes and 2 unopened past-due envelopes. He didn't sit down right away, just stood over it, hands on the back of a chair, like he was waiting for the camera to move. It didn't. Eventually, he exhaled and pulled the film out, careful not to expose it. He dug through a box in the closet and found what he hadn't touched since college: a developing tank, tongs, an old timer with dust caked around the edges. He was surprised the red bulb still worked when he screwed it in above the bathroom mirror. The glow painted the room in blood and shadow. Andrew moved slowly, unsure but not clumsy. It came back like muscle memory. Developer, stop, fix. Gentle agitation, wait, drain, rinse. He pulled the strip free. It was still damp when he held it up to the light. The first frame was blurred. Something had moved. Maybe he'd breathed too hard. The second was better, but still soft, out of focus. Then came the third. He froze. There they were, the Kleinhoffs, sitting just as he remembered. But something was wrong. Not with the picture itself, it was sharp, framed well, but with their expressions. They weren't smiling. Their eyes looked focused. Not on the camera, but on something past it. Past him. He leaned in. Mrs. Kleinhoff's lips were slightly parted, as if caught mid-sentence. Mr. Kleinhoff's hands were curled tighter than he remembered. Their posture had changed, tense, rigid. And in the very background, at the edge of the garden's shadow, there was something that looked like movement, a shimmer, a smudge, a shape that wasn't supposed to be there. He pulled the strip back, heart thudding, and moved on to the final frame. They were glaring at the lens. Not angry, not scared, just aware. Andrew dropped the film into the drying rack, rubbed his arms and turned off the light. The image clung to the inside of his eyes like afterburn. Back in the kitchen, he poured a glass of water, hands shaking. He told himself he was just rusty. The chemicals could have been expired. Light leaks happened. But it didn't feel like that. He sat down hard and stared at the camera again, still, silent, waiting. The next morning brought no relief. Andrew sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the wall, the images from the night before still flickering behind his eyes. He hadn't slept, not really, just drifted in and out of uneasy thoughts, too aware of the camera sitting just a few feet away. Eventually, the daylight guilt kicked in. He dressed, loaded the second roll of film, and slipped the camera back into its case. It felt like a ritual now, like stepping into something he didn't quite believe in but couldn't ignore. Andrew stepped out to check the mail, the camera still sitting silent on his kitchen table. He ran into Mr. Kleinhoff at the front of the building. The old man was returning from a walk, newspaper folded neatly under his arm, the same way he always carried it, like it was regulation. "Good morning," Kleinhoff said, polite as always. Andrew hesitated. "Hey, I just wanted to say thanks again for letting me take your photo. I don't think it came out very well." Kleinhoff tilted his head slightly, lips pressing together in a thin smile. "Ah, that happens sometimes." Andrew nodded awkwardly and stepped aside to let him pass. The old man climbed the stairs slowly, methodically, as if every step was counted. Inside his apartment, Kleinhoff shut the door with a soft click and turned the deadbolt. He stood still for a moment, listening. Then he walked down the narrow hallway to the bedroom. He opened the closet. A row of plain jackets hung neatly inside. He slid one aside and reached for the empty hanger, lifting his coat into place with practiced care. As the fabric settled, a shape emerged behind it, something hidden by habit more than shame. A long grey uniform, preserved in a plastic garment bag, hung like a shadow. An iron cross sat in a small wooden box on the shelf above it. Folded beneath that, wrapped in brittle yellow paper, was a red armband with a black swastika. On the back wall, barely visible unless you were looking, were 3 black and white photographs pinned with brass tacks. In one, a line of gaunt prisoners moved past a watchtower. In another, younger soldiers, one of them unmistakably Kleinhoff, stood smiling beside a barbed wire fence. He stared at the photos for a long moment. Then he slid the coat back into place and closed the door, quietly, like sealing something that should never have been opened. Andrew left the apartment and walked the city with no direction. He told himself it was just for practice, just to finish the role. He took photos of rusted fences, broken windows, faded murals. Anything that didn't look back at him. A few hours in, he found himself near the shop where Lena worked. His feet moved toward it before he could second-guess himself. Maybe she'd want to be photographed too. Maybe it would shake the weirdness loose, but as he got close, he saw someone else behind the counter, a younger guy rearranging a rack of sunglasses. Andrew slowed, hesitated. The guy didn't even glance up. The little bell above the door never rang. Lena wasn't there. He kept walking. 8 blocks away, police tape fluttered gently in the breeze outside a brick apartment building. An ambulance idled nearby, its lights off, but the engine running. A sheet-covered stretcher was being wheeled down the steps. 2 neighbors stood near the curb, speaking in hushed tones. "She was always so sweet," one said, shaking their head. "Had so much to live for." The other just stared down the sidewalk, silent. Beside them, a peace sign drawn in chalk was beginning to fade, its edges blurred, the color washing away in the light drizzle. He grabbed a coffee from the corner store. The woman behind the counter greeted him by name, but her smile faltered when she saw the camera. He chalked it up to imagination and walked on. The last few frames ticked down. He ended up near the old Art Deco building just a few blocks from the pawn shop. He'd always liked the look of it, angular and stubborn, like it had survived something ugly. He tried to frame it from the sidewalk, but couldn't quite get the shot, so he stepped off the curb. Backed up a few feet, lifted the camera. Click. He wheeled the film forward. One more shot left. A horn blared. Too close. He turned his head, eyes wide. The last thing Andrew heard was the soft click of the shutter. Then, nothing. They cleared the scene fast. Bus accidents drew attention, but the victim hadn't made much noise. No family on record, no next of kin, just a name and a wallet full of expired student IDs and a library card. Later that afternoon, a man who'd witnessed the crash bent down behind a parked delivery van. He saw something glinting in the shadows. A leather case. Inside, an old camera, still warm from the sun. He carried it 2 blocks, past a newsstand and a bar, to the dusty door of the pawn shop. The bell over the door gave its tired little chime. The old man behind the counter didn't look surprised. The witness placed the case on the glass. "How much can you give me for this old camera and case?" The shopkeeper stared for a long moment, then nodded once. "Put it in the window," he said. "I'll give you $15 for it." Later, after the store had gone quiet again, he opened the case. Inside were the old photographs, charred village, bridge, mangled car. And a new one, a city bus,